Hello, you lovely listeners. I'm Amy. Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast, where we will delve into the minds of the business people we have met in the process of launching our first card game. We will be uncovering their secrets to success, their biggest mistakes, and sharing the key lessons they have picked up en route. So, if you're looking for an engaging chinwag mixed with business insights and a good pinch of fun, you're in the right place. Let's have a really good conversation. Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast. Before I welcome today's guest, I just wanted to let you know that the guest coming up has just taken me through a mindfulness moment exercise, and we have recorded that for you to actually listen to and enjoy yourself, just to take a moment of calm and a moment of pause. So I'll put that in a separate audio for you to have a listen to. But let me welcome today's guest, Jem Fuller, leadership, mindset, communication coach, speaker, and author. Welcome, Jem.
Hello, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Now, I feel I didn't even scratch the surface of your, shall we say, resume, if you will, because if we look at some of the other things that have led you on your journey, that, I believe you were a bit of a punk back in your days. You've been backpacking through the Indian subcontinent. You have worked in leadership roles in large multinational organizations, but also you've been an actor, a singer-songwriter, a tattoo artist, a fire dancer, a kindergarten teacher, and a volunteer in Asia, a travel consultant. And you are currently also leading retreats in the Himalayas. So, goodness me, what haven't you done?
Yeah, I know it does. It seems like a lot.
If you could go back, which one of those, should we say, I don't know if they were all jobs, obviously some of them sound like awesome experience and hobbies. Which ones of them would you go back to now if you could?
Oh, look, I mean, I still write songs. and I'll always write songs, and I love music. So, if I had a magic wand, I hadn't thought about this for a long time, but actually there was a period when I was living in London and I was saving up to get back to India. And a friend of mine was a sound engineer working in studios in Germany, in Munich, in Germany. And he said, come over in the nighttime. I've got access to the studios and we'll record an album for you and of your original songs. So in the nighttime, we were going into this studio and we had it to ourselves and we were recording. One morning, the owners of the studio came in and they had a small independent record label in Germany. And he played one of my original songs for them. And I was very shy back at the time. I was like, oh, no, don't do that. But he played it for them. And on the spot, they said, what are you doing? We'll sign you to our record label and you can tour around Europe and pursue this if you want to. And I said, no.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had have said yes and started touring around Europe as a singer-songwriter. I don't know. But
Wow.
When you just asked then if you could go back to one of those things, then the singer-songwriter thing, I'd go back to that for sure.
Wow. And can you still fire dance?
Yes, I can. And when my kids were my kids are now 20 and 18. My younger boy just got his driver's license yesterday. So now both of my boys are independent. They've got their driver's licenses and their cars. But when they were in primary school, someone at the primary school found out that I do fire dancing. And so they roped me into performing at the winter solstice every year for all the little kids in the primary school. And my two boys were really proud that was their dad, twirling this fire and dancing with fire. But that was the last time I've done it. I haven't done it since then. So
yes, you'll have to dust off your fire dancing skills. Today, we are going to actually be talking, more about some of the areas you're passionate about, and particularly the topic of conscious communication. Can you tell us, our listeners, a little bit more about your background, what it is you're currently doing, and how you got into it?
My bread and butter work, so my day-to-day work is as a leadership coach, helping leaders create healthier, vibrant workplace cultures. So that's, and I coach leaders one-to-one and I facilitate one-to-many. So I run workshops with groups of people, both online and in the room. So that's the bulk of my bread and butter work. And I've been running my own coaching consultancy now since 2013. so 11 years now. And prior to the pandemic, it had just become more and more apparent to me that not only people in leadership roles or in team roles, but also people in their personal lives, quite often where we come unstuck is in the communication. So take, for example, a married couple that are struggling in their relationship. It's not that they don't love each other. It's just that they're missing each other in the communication. They're miscommunicating. Or even a leader in a team. So when there's a leader and the team is not engaged or feeling aligned or leaning into the work, it's not because they don't all care about what they're doing. It's because the communication hasn't been great. And so I noticed this theme of communication showing up more and more, and that was a big part of what I was helping people do, was communicate more effectively. So when the pandemic came and I had a bit more time on my hands, locked up at home, I thought, well, now's the time perhaps to write my first book. And I started writing about communication. And I was fascinated also because communication, it can be affected contextually, So in my previous marriage, my then wife used to say to me, "Oh, you're terrible at communication. Yeah, you're an island. You kind of just shut down and you don't communicate very well with me." And she was right. If something mattered to me in that relationship, I would get triggered and I would get emotional, and then my mind would kind of freeze up and I couldn't think of what to say properly, and I would stumble over my words, or I'd get a dry mouth and get a bit emotional and shaky, and I'd just shut down and walk away. And so she was right. I was terrible in communication, but then I could jump in the car and put my suit and tie on and go to work as a senior leader in a large organization, and I could stand up in front of 200 people and communicate very eloquently. I was like, what is this? What's going on? How can I be so good at communication in one context and terrible at it in another? Anyway, so I thought a lot about communication, and started writing the book, which got me to think about it even more.
And the book is The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men. Why do you think it's so important, this topic, for men in particular?
Yeah, so I started writing the book generally for anybody, and it was The Art of Conscious Communication. And the reason I call it conscious communication, quite literally, the more conscious we are of something, the more aware of it we are. And I think that the more conscious we are of the communication itself, the better we can be playing our part in that, better as a listener, better as the sharer of information, more aware of the higher purpose of the communication, of the conversation, rather than just my own agenda. So therefore, the more effective the communication. And communication itself, the origins of the word communication, it's not a telling, it's a sharing. It's to make common, hence the word communication, and the same root of the word for community and communal and, all these sorts of things. So I started writing the book just broadly for anybody. And then I had a book writing mentor in Sydney, here in Australia, and she suggested that I'd pick an audience, pick a niche to write for. And she actually suggested that I write the book for men. She said, I think this book would be really good for men. And so I thought, okay, I'll do that. And so I did. So I started writing it specifically for men, which then sent me on this kind of tangent over the last few years since the book was published, of being interviewed a lot and writing a lot and being published in articles and papers and all sorts of formats around men and men's mental health, and updating the antiquated stereotype and the cultural archetype of man or men, or what it is to be a man. And, for us here in Australia, but also I've got lots of connections in America, and they experience the same kind of cultural stereotypes around men. And my generation, so I was born in 1971. My father was, born through the World War II era in depression in the UK, in Leeds. And understandably at that time, when it was real survival type stuff, and his dad was in World War II, and the kind of cultural indoctrination from father to son, or even from mother to son as well, was, suck it up, harden up, toughen up, grit and bear it. We don't have time to sit around contemplating life and being emotional. You got to get on with it, get out there, get a job, work hard, survive, and that then the ripple effect came down through the generations. So I was brought up, I was quite a sensitive young boy. And so I would feel emotions and express them, but my father thought that wasn't okay. He was doing his best. Like he was just trying to raise the best son he possibly could. But he would get angry at me if I cried, and he would, quite forcefully tell me to stop crying and stiff up a lip and say things like, "Don't cry like a girl."
Yes.
We used to, and I think there's probably still a lot of parents that still say this to their boys. So here you've got this young person who's being told that it's not okay to feel what you're feeling. And so that has then created generations of males who have divorced themselves from their emotional selves and don't even know how to access or process what they're feeling, let alone communicate it. And so then we end up with horrible things like domestic violence and lots of anger and most of the violence perpetrated in the world is perpetrated by males. And I wonder if we had generations of males who were more in touch with their emotions and then had the ability to actually express how they're feeling about things before it bottled up and tipped over in an eruption of violence. I wonder if that might be a different story. So I believe that we've as men, generally speaking, not all men, I'm generalizing, but I believe that men have the opportunity to improve our communication.
Absolutely. And such an important topic and an area. And obviously you're a father and of two boys. Have your boys come on this journey with you? What do they think about it? Are they open-minded to perhaps what, some of the things that you are highlighting in communication, or are they very much like, yeah, Dad, whatever?
Yeah. They're certainly who they are now, and they're both young men now. My younger boy just turned 18 and got his driver's license this week, and
Amazing.
My older boy's 20. So they've both got their own cars and their own driver's licenses, and I'm like, wow, I actually get to take off the taxi driver hat and hang it on the wall, and I'm going to call in some favours now and go, hey, boys, come and pick me up from the pub.
Exactly.
No. They're certainly who they are. As a part of being my sons and their mother's sons and in the family and then the community and then the school environment that they've been a part of. So we are, as much as there's nurture and nature balance, we're certainly a product of our environment. So yes, they, but if I ever went up to them and said to them, you should do it like this, they'd be like, yeah, right, Dad, whatever. So both is true. And I've tried to not try and preach to them, but at the same time, as a parent, you want your kids to have the best chance at having the best life possible. And some certain things that are going to help them with that, some of our core values, like if you're kind and polite and, if you're open-minded and curious, like all these things that we try and hope that our kids will get from us. And sometimes, of course, I'm guilty of it as well, of saying, hey, if you did it like this, you'll get a better result. But more often than not, and especially as kids become teenagers and then young adults, they kind of go, yeah, whatever. So I think they learn more symbiotically. I think they learn more through being around you and observing the way you are. And so my father shut down my emotions, and I've been very conscious to create a space for them to be emotional if they feel to, not telling them that they have to, but both of my boys will sit and openly cry with me if they're upset. They will talk with me about anything. They will tell me anything because I never created a situation where they felt like they couldn't share with me deeper stuff or challenging stuff they were going through. Whereas with my father, I didn't feel like I could tell him any of that stuff. So I hope that I have, broken the record, and I hope that I've created a different father-son relationship to the one that I had with my father. Mind you, I don't want to paint an awful picture of that either, because my father loved me deeply and I loved him, and he was a good man. he was a really good man. And so, there's some of those aspects that I hope have come across. But in answer to your question, yeah, I think if we try and preach to our kids, they kind of switch off and go, whatever. But if we do our best to be the person and emulate the values that we hope that they will take on board, you watch, they slowly do. I think they really do.
That's amazing, because you have led such a interesting life. You have had so many different experiences. They have your knowledge at their fingertips, and they might not know it now, realize it now, but yeah, I'm sure down the line when they actually look back at all the things that you have done, they'll be like, God, wow, that was pretty crazy, pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think they realize a fair bit now. Yeah, I think they realize a fair bit now already. I had a really proud father moment the other day. I was noticing the way one of my sons is with his girlfriend, and he treats her beautifully. It's so lovely to watch. He's so courteous and considerate. He puts her first all the time. He always makes sure she's okay. He's very respectful. And I said to him the other day, I said, mate, I'm so proud of the way you treat your girlfriend. It's really beautiful. And he looked at me and he said, where do you reckon I get that from, Dad?
Oh,
So I had that proud father moment. Yeah.
Oh, that is so lovely to hear. What are some of the common communication challenges that you do see through the work you do, whether it is in the workplace or with some of your one-on-one clients?
The biggest challenge that we all face as humans in communication is our ego. 100%. That's the biggest thing that gets in the way all the time, because our ego, which is not a bad thing, we've all got one, and we should have an ego. It's a part of being human. Our ego is our sense of identity, but our ego is very defensive because the ego believes that it's under attack, right? Yeah. And that it needs to defend its sense of identity. And our sense of identity is also enmeshed into our political views, our ideological views, our religious views, the way we believe things should be. So we have very firm ideas on how we think things should be, and that forms our sense of identity, and we get very defensive over that. So that's when we're in a conversation, and if there's anyone expressing an opinion that is contrary to the way we see things, we're internally getting defensive. We're queuing up to jump in and say, no, it's like this. Or if we agree with them, we're queuing up to say, yeah, that I agree, that's how it is. But there's almost like this slightly desperate energy to defend, and that's the ego. So that's what gets in the way, and if we can, and we can, there are certain practices that we can employ to get better at just letting the ego sit to the side for a second, and remembering that we don't have anything to defend, and leaning into a curiosity, leaning into a seeking to understand, and genuinely listening and trying to get where the other person's coming from. And this is a skill that we can develop, and I think it's a worthwhile pursuit.
Yeah, sometimes you feel you're wanting to reply, you're wanting to jump in, you're wanting to give your 2 cents into what the person is saying. And sometimes you just, and I do practice myself, I think, Amy, don't bother saying it. Just, you don't need to say it. You don't need to add that bit in. What do you think about when we look at conversations that people perhaps are struggling to have or avoiding to have in their life?
Yeah, it's I'm this is something that I'm super passionate about, because we all have or have had that conversation. There's that conversation, and you feel like if you could just have that conversation, it would free up so much of a burden that you're carrying, or it would free up the tension. There wouldn't be the eggshells anymore. If I could only just have that conversation with that person, and whether it's a conversation that you were hoping to have with your parent that you just have been avoiding having because you don't want to upset them, or a conversation that you feel like you should be having with someone in your team at work, and you're the team leader, and you're like, oh, I need to have that conversation with them, but I'm avoiding it. We're kicking the can down the road. And so there's so much liberation to be had from either having that conversation, or perhaps even having a conversation with yourself where you realize, I don't actually need to have that conversation. I can reach some sense of absolution or liberation internally doing the work with myself. And to do that, I think the best place to start is by understanding why. Why? What's the higher purpose of having that conversation? Yeah. Because when we think, I need to go and have that conversation, just say it's with your spouse, and your spouse has done that thing that they do and you get triggered by it and you're pissed off and you're like, ask them not to say that to me. And they know it upsets me and they've just said it again, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to go and have that conversation with her. I'm going to go and tell her, you did this and I'm upset. Right? But before I have that conversation, the idea is that we think about, but why? Why would I want to have that conversation? And the surface level answer to that might be, well, because I want them to know that when they do that, I get pissed off. Yeah, but why do you want them to know that? Well, because I don't want them to do it again. But why do you not want them to do it again? Well, because if they don't do that, then I'll be calm and we'll be nice to each other. We'll be in harmony. And you go, oh, and why do you want to be in harmony? Well, because we love each other. So now we're starting to get to the real higher reason why. Why do I want to have this conversation with my spouse? Because I love them and I want us to be in harmony, right? So now I'm going, well, that's a good enough reason to have the conversation. So if it wasn't a good enough reason, maybe I shouldn't have that conversation, but I think that's a good reason. And then you can go into that conversation and lead with that. Come into the conversation and say...
brings it a different energy.
Right. Coming and sitting down and saying, sweetheart, I want to have this conversation with you because I love you so much. And I hope for us to be in harmony as much as possible. I love it when we're in harmony with each other. And that's why I want to have this conversation with you, right? It's a whole different way of approaching it than coming in and saying, I want to talk with you because that thing you did pisses me off and you know that, blah, blah. You can imagine the different versions of that conversation that are going to take place, right?
Absolutely. And it's that, just exactly taking a moment and having that self-awareness of those conversations and why you're needing to have them. And is it to actually satisfy the ego that you mentioned, or is it for something else?
Yeah. I was chatting with someone the other day and they said, I want to have that conversation with my mum. And I said, why? And they said, because I want my mum to admit that the way she treated me when I was a kid was traumatic for me. And I said, why do you want her to admit that? And they said, so that I can move on from that trauma and be free and come back to a place of love with my mum. I said, okay, so what you're really wanting is to come to a place of love with your mum. And she said, yes. And I said, you can't control whether your mum's going to say to you what you want her to say. That bit you can't control. But you can actually control, or at least you can develop the ability to come to a place of loving your mum unconditionally. Without even her saying anything, you can come to a place of unconditional love for your mum. And if you did that, then perhaps you wouldn't even need to have that conversation. And if you did choose to have that conversation, but you were coming from a place of unconditional love, then she's more likely to actually soften and say, sweetheart, I'm so sorry for what I did to you when you were little. Right? So understanding what you're wanting to achieve from having that conversation might lead you in a path to get there that you hadn't thought of before.
Oh, that's brilliant insight. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Before we go into some of the questions from our Really Good Conversations pack, can you recommend any tips or advice for people getting more conscious about their communication?
Yes, 2 tips. 1, practice mindfulness meditation, because when you practice mindfulness meditation, you're practicing the ability to observe yourself and the environment without being identified and stuck in it. And so the ability to come from a place of observation means that you can be less reactionary in conversations and more responsive. So mindfulness meditation. And then the other one too is just what I was saying about understanding why should I have this conversation? What is the higher purpose of this piece of communication right now? And remembering that will help guide a more functional conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Right. Well, as I like to put all of our guests on the spot, I've picked you out 3 questions from the Really Good Conversations first edition pack. So, question number 1. This is a favourite. If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
Be careful, he's passionate and he'll speak his truth.
Fantastic. And I can see in the couple of calls that we have had and been a part of, I can see your passion, your energy, come through so visibly when you're speaking. So yes, definitely I could agree. Question number 2. What is the most remote place you have traveled to? And can you please describe it for us?
Yes. I traveled, I hitchhiked up into the Kailash valleys, which are nestled up on the border of Pakistan, North Pakistan and Afghanistan, just above the northwestern frontier province. And there's no public transport to get there. I had to hitchhike on the back of trucks. And it's stunning, absolutely stunning. That's where the Himalayan mountains collide with the Pamir Mountains and the Kailash Mountains and the Tajik Mountains that come down up there. And it's absolutely stunning and somewhat dangerous. But it was a pretty cool place to get to.
Wow. That has made me think, what would you say now if your sons were like, right, so Dad, I'm going to go off and hitchhike in the Himalayas, Pakistan. What would you say?
Go. It's stunning. It's beautiful. Keep your wits about you, but go.
Love that. And question number 3. What is one piece of wisdom you want to pass on to future generations?
You are enough. You shouldn't be more like anyone else. You shouldn't be more like the people on social media. You shouldn't be more like anyone else. You should just be you.
Beautiful. That is such a great answer. And then the finishing question that I ask all of our guests is, if you could ask any person, dead or alive, a question, who would it be and what would you ask them?
I would ask my father, who died 14 years ago. I would ask my father, Dad, if you could turn back time, what would you do differently?
Wow. That would be amazing to ask so many people and hear the answer.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? Oh, that is wonderful. Jem, thank you so much for your time today and just giving us an insight into your world, the work that you do. It's obviously a topic that we're super passionate about, and it's just amazing to connect with people like yourself who are doing such, positive work in this space. How can our listeners find out more about you? How can they connect with you?
The easiest way is jemfuller.com. And then you can find everything through there. Just a gift for your listeners, if they would like. I would like to give you lifetime access to my mindfulness meditation introduction course. It's 10 meditations introducing you to mindfulness. If you go to my website and click on courses, find your way to the mindfulness course. And then when you go to the checkout page in the coupon code box, just type in the word spring gift. So it's 2 words, but with no space between them, spring gift. Just type that in there and you'll get the course for free. If you want to follow me on socials, I'm most prolific on Instagram. You can follow me there. But everything else, the TEDx talk, I'd love it if you go and watch the TEDx talk. That's on YouTube. You can find that through my website. You can read the book. You can find out about our retreats. You can reach out to me. I'm really accessible. If you're interested to even just have a chat, shoot me an email through the website and we'll get connected.
Fantastic. And we did a beautiful mindfulness moment just before we came on this podcast episode. And I will include that recording as well as a link for people to take a moment out for themselves. And thank you so much for doing that for us as a separate little recording.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jem.
You're welcome, Amy.
Thanks Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on today's guests. And if really good conversations are your thing, hit subscribe and join us next time for more business journeys, insights and banter.